Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a realm where reality intertwines with the inexplicable, where the boundaries of reason dissolve into the shadows of uncertainty. Welcome to the political twilight zone. I am your guide through this enigmatic labyrinth, where politics and power take on life of their own. In this dimension, the threads of truth weave a tapestry of intrigue, challenging our perception of the world we thought we knew. In this world, nothing is as it seems, and the truth lies buried beneath layers of deceit. Prepare to venture where reason meets the unexplained, and where the unexplained might just be.
Hi, everybody. Well, another week goes by here, and it's been pretty exciting, which is different than the weeks before, where things were just, well, they were depressing, but they were also frightening. So I think we're better off now. I have to say that I think things are headed in the right direction. I didn't mention it because I didn't want to bother anybody, but sometime after Thanksgiving, I happened to run across the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. They were across the street at a pizza place over here, and they were at a table eating a pizza. I'm pretty sure it was pepperoni, and messing around on their phones. And I thought that's just getting too close. You know, we don't need them that. I don't need them that close. I don't know where the horses were, probably at the back. Well, and famine, as usual, wouldn't participate. There's nothing on his plate. Everybody else was eating pizza. Not him, just looking off in the distance. That's how that goes, I guess. But I haven't seen them since then. I'm thinking they're waiting for a long time, I hope. For a little bit, just probably right after COVID and somewhat after the crushing defeat in Afghanistan we had and stuff. I thought I saw them playing some gin rummy in the window as I drove past a restaurant, but I couldn't be sure. But I haven't seen them recently, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. I'm not so sure I feel so good about some of the mental capacity and state of our liberal friends. I, as you know, periodically go skipping through their websites and some of their places that they like to turn the lights off and tell each other ghost stories. And it's pretty sad. And it's still scary. I was going to bring some of them on, bring some of the comments on, but it was hard for me to find any that could be played on radio. The immediate objective to go to scatological language is extremely high with these people. Usually, one of the first 3 words will be something we can't say on the radio and probably shouldn't say loudly in public. But that's pretty much how they get wound up. Sort of like with a lawnmower. You know, you pull in the lawnmower and old Briggs and Stratton, and I think they kind of fire themselves up with a lot of language. We saw some great language this weekend, didn't we? This week, with some of the folks from Congress. Yeah. You know, there was a time, if you were in Congress, you just didn't get up and scream obscenities. How has that been so long ago? It feels like it, but I don't think it really was. I think they've slipped off the edge of the cliff. Now, you've probably seen these clips many, many times. What I thought was interesting was both the humor and the sort of sad shock I was getting out of it. Some of the humor, I mean, you guys have seen, if you're watching anything on Fox or anything like that, you've seen Chuck Schumer out there, Schumer the humor. We will win. We will. It makes me laugh just to think about it. Thank you, Chuck. I mean, I appreciate you being out there and bringing a smile to everybody's face. On top of which is he had to look down at the lectern and read a couple of times, we will win. Oh, dear. Someday we'll look back on this and wish it had never happened. But I have to tell you, when you're looking around at some of these people's ideas, it's feeling like you're listening to someone describe a place that you're not familiar with. And they think they're describing America. Some of the very worst in that, and I think this is a terrible thing that the media and the left's propaganda has done, is the trans community, which is very active and can be, very virulent. And I watched that Worcester meeting for the Worcester, Massachusetts, trying to have Worcester become a sanctuary city for trans community, and some of the speakers, and sure, they're a little odd. It seems to me that you have a hard time getting people to take you seriously when you don't seem to take yourself very seriously. But, part of having any sort of problem that you sort of live your life through is not any fun unless you manifest it. Is it fun to dye your hair pink, wear big glasses, and just sit in your house all day, staring out the window and thinking things about, how bad the world is? Well, no. How much fun is that? You got to get on YouTube or X or TikTok, and you got to be out there, because it doesn't really exist if you don't demonstrate it, is it? See, that's that sort of tree falls in the forest issue. I mean, I think a lot of these folks, that it's not that they want to be this sort of outrageous way they've chosen to be, but they want people to acknowledge it, because sitting in the house or going over to their friend's house that's just as loopy as they are, what's the payoff to that? After all, you have to feel oppressed. If you're not oppressed, you're not doing your job. I think this is how they believe that. So, which is one of the reasons they gin this stuff up, to say that things are going on that they're not going on. I mean, I kept seeing these signs, that silence equals death. I'm not sure in general what you make out of that. I think what they mean by that is not speaking out about their issues causes people to die, and that it causes, I guess, trans people to pass on. I don't think that's true. I think that anybody can harass and finagle someone to the point where they may do something stupid if they have that, sort of predilection. And we do see some terrible examples of that kind of thing online, particularly with young people. I don't mean young people like 25 years old. Yeah, if you're 25 and you think you're a young person, you're not. You're an adult. Get over it. All right? A young person, someone like 14 or 15, and they think they know it all. They're pretty sure they're an adult, and everything is sort of keyed up when you're that age, right? And all these things that the parents and what we'll call grown-ups, and we do have air quotes around that, don't take particularly seriously about your life, really serious to you. We all remember that. But add that pressure in to have that phone in front of you all the time and be looking at it and seeing this fake world. All these people doing things that they're not really doing. Living a life that they're not really living. And some of them getting their fun out of attacking other people relentlessly. And the more that they succeed in this relentless attack, the more they want to do it. Because they're anonymous for the most part. Hey, there's bullies out there that do that. That you see. At least they're visible. Think how bad people are when they know they're invisible. And so I don't know what the solution is to that part of society. It's kind of a reflection of all the things we've been talking about in terms of getting out there and, getting misinformed. And by the way, misinformation is just, disinformation and misinformation are just the worst terms anymore. I don't think the people that use it even know what they're talking about. It sets the hair on the back of my neck goes up just a little bit when people say that. And I don't think they even know what they're talking about. They're not talking about misinformation. They're talking about things that they disagree with. And we all know that. That's what's become the translation. It's like if someone says casa, they mean a house in Spanish. Someone says misinformation, you mean you disagree with me and I don't like it. Oh, there we go. There we go. You folks listening on the podcast don't get to hear that bumper music, but we were listening to the theme music from Miami Vice. Yeah, as I listened to that, I could see the cigarette boats flying over the bay faster than you could be. I could see men walking around in unreconstructed pastel suits with sunglasses and Bren 10s hanging under their shirts, getting in and out of Ferraris, driving around on streets that suddenly mysteriously were wet all the time at night. And it was a time. It was a time, yeah. I think the worst thing about it was that, as with many style choices, people who just should obviously not look good in a particular milieu choose to do that. Somehow, Don Johnson could pull quite effortlessly off wearing like a pastel blue T-shirt, a white unreconstructed jacket with maybe the sleeves pulled up a little bit, some kind of baggy trousers and some sort of white, sort of quasi-tennis shoes, loping around and looking pretty sharp that way. But it was not a look that many people could pull off. And it really required kind of a whole commitment to it. You had to have the whole thing. You had the whole trousseau. You needed to kind of have the haircut too. You kind of had to have the right sunglasses, and you had to have the right, I think, sort of stature to be able to pull that off. Yeah, that was kind of unfortunate. There was a period of time where that was happening. Well, there was also a period of time when people were dressing like Michael Jackson from his videos like, let's see, Bad and, of course, Thriller and a few things like that. You guys remember the leather jackets with the pulled-up sleeves and sort of they're red and they had like the V, downward V's on the back of them. Yeah, that's, I used to remember seeing those and thought, what's the message there? I mean, I sort of got the Miami Vice message, that sort of a lifestyle. I wasn't able to quite pull a lifestyle out of that jacket. But anyway, we're back, and yeah, I'm looking through some of our things here, and some of my notes are just, frankly, they're disturbing, of course, but some of them are pretty good. They did a poll on Friday in Arizona. Well, it's really a focus group about swing voters, if they approve of Musk's Doge handling ripping through Washington. And surprisingly, 7 out of the 11 people they questioned who were supposedly swing voters, in other words, not Republicans or Democrats, thought it was a good idea. In our country today, it's hard to get 10 people, 5 people, or 7 people to agree on anything. So you get something like that, I think that's pretty impressive, especially when you consider the sort of dead-end kind of rhetoric we're getting from the left. Sure, like I said in the last segment, there's humor in it. Of course there is. I mean, they don't mean it to be, but there certainly is. I mean, the screaming, the faux tears, the sort of going back to the cadence of a Southern preacher in a Pentecostal church. That seems to be something that you have to do. Speaking in a slight Southern accent, even though you're from Michigan. All those things seem to come out. And then you get to sling some songs. That might be the better word. Sing some songs, from the Revolutionary War and the 60s struggle for civil rights. And imagine that all these things are as important, that your things, rather, are important as those things. They're not. It's extremely important to the nation to get this thing straightened out. But you're rallying to protect USAID from sending money to Peru for transgender coloring books does not make you the equal of people getting fire hosed during the civil rights movement. You're just acting like it. And that's dangerous. Because what we were talking about the last time about watching some of these poor trans people who, some of them may legitimately think that something bad is going to happen to them just because they're trans and just because Trump's in office. That's not true. We know that's not true. You would think that people who are paying attention would know that's not true, but it depends what you pay attention to. if you pay attention to some of these not particularly well-watched the cable channels and a few things like that, and some of the online things, your world is different. Like I said, it's like describing something that, where's that at? And it gets drummed into you. Now, not a lot of people are watching that, but the ones that are getting a real beating. They're getting really beaten around until they feel like they got to go do something. Something's got to happen. As I think Shakespeare said, my friends, you go to do, you know what? Know what? You do not know what. There we go. And I see a lot of that. And that's dangerous because that's just sort of percolating energy out there. These are people that are keyed up, scared, keyed up, retaliatory, and not exactly sure what their target should be. I mean, of course, President Trump, and now, of course, Elon Musk, too. But that's not so easy. You could go to some place and protest them, but that's not nearly as fulfilling. And you're much more wound up than that. You want to get into it. You want to turn some cars over, something, because you have to be violent in some stages because you're protecting yourself from the violence, right? It's the stop making me hitting you kind of thing. And so they're just working these people up, and it's to no one's benefit. And when you see what's being told to them and you actually know what's going on, that really is disinformation and misinformation, as much as I hate those words anymore, because it's not misinformation, it's lies. You don't misinform people about some of these things. You lie to them. You say things that are happening that aren't happening. You say things that aren't happening that are happening. That's not misinformation. You could call it that, I suppose, in polite company, but what is it? It's a lie. And despite the fact that the left has done nothing but accuse Trump and those folks in his cabinet and around him of lying, they're just the sort of boasting that Trump does and the sort of rhetoric that he has out there is far from lying. But on the other side, the things they say about what he says, what he means, they know better. That's a lot closer to that term, isn't it? So if you want, some of you, many of us used to read the Drudge Report. Remember when it was actually run by Drudge? And it was very conservative, and it had a lot of good news stories on it. And Drudge had a way of putting headlines together that was kind of interesting. It kind of gave you a feeling. He's obviously either sold that Drudge Report to someone else, has taken a vacation to a mental institution, or just doesn't care anymore because it's completely left-wing, and its influence is completely dropped off. And I don't know what their numbers look like, but they can't be 10 or 12% of what they were when Drudge was running it. If you go there, you'll see what's considered to be kind of the hair on fire left, but only partially hair on fire. Maybe just around the ears. It gets a lot worse than that when you go out there. But you could drop by there, watch something, see it for yourself, like on television. A press conference, for instance. Trump gives really interesting press conferences, I have to say. I never thought I would sit and listen to a guy signing things and just chatting with the people in the room with him. But it's pretty interesting. That's a great way to do things, especially if you have that sort of talent like Trump does. And, for all of the sort of slightly backward social skills that Elon has, he's fun to watch doing that stuff because he doesn't care. And it isn't just because he's the richest man in the world or anything like that. It's because he's just built that way. Doesn't bother him. And he knows he's right. So you're not making him question himself. So it's a lot harder to get under his skin. So you get those two in a room together, and it's great. And I see Trump has been doing some things, and Elon does this too. And I don't know who influenced whom, but they're quite ready to tell you that was a stupid question. Or I don't think that was a very smart question. I mean, Elon used to do that when they asked him sort of quasi-technical questions that were like, well, on the moon, do you think that people would be better served by Democrats living up there? Or, you know, some weird political thing or something. And Elon would just sit for a minute, you know, sometimes for several seconds, which kind of drug out on television. And then he would just say, I don't think that's a very smart question. and you know, it's sort of like, you're wasting my time asking me stuff like that. And Trump has picked that up now, hasn't he? And I think he was doing it before, too. I mean, I don't think like Elon came up with it. But together, they kind of give each other some energy. You know, Trump can just be signing something on the desk and not even look at you like, say, Caitlin Collins, and just say, we can talk about that. And I don't think it's a very smart question, especially coming from you. and just move on. Doesn't even look up. That's fun. So there is some fun out there, and there is a sun coming on the horizon. All right, we're back trying to figure all this stuff out. Well, I certainly am glad to read the news anymore when I see all of this stuff coming up. It's hard to say. It's very disturbing to hear about all of these monetary issues, and while our money's wasted, misused, and certainly misdirected. But it's nice that we can find it. I mean, like we talked about before, what's fascinating about Elon is that he thinks differently. And he's not a government person, so that goes right out the window. So when everybody else thought that this Doge thing was going to go, you know, same like every other commission, we make these studies and then we make these recommendations and you guys thank us and give me a plaque and I go away and nothing happens. Exactly what they thought was going to happen. Or they'd have hearings, you know. They'd have hearings where people come in, Mr. So-and-so from USAID, you know, what's going on with your money over there? We have a report that some of it might be being wasted. Well, no, it's not, sir. It's not being wasted. Well, we'd like to get some of those records. Well, I'm going to have to withhold those records under some theory of mine. And we would go on like that forever, right? Is that, you know, the whole idea that something like a review of what was going on at USAID and places like that would happen in any kind of meaningful time frame was not contemplated. That's not how Washington works. Instead, so as we've said before, Elon shows up there with some whiz kids, and they ask not just to have a hearing or doing this and that. They want to see the receipts, right? They want to see, well, you spent all this money. We gave you this money. Where'd this go? And they didn't do it like a forensic audit, which is very time-consuming, very precise. They went down to the nitty-gritty, as they say, the real nitty-gritty, and just went to where'd the money go and what authorized it, right? So X amount of money went. Okay, what's that money tied to? Oh, to this program, this contract, this. That's all they did. They just matched them up. It didn't take very long, especially when they were computerizing the whole thing with their algorithms so that they could go out and get it fast. That is bad for Washington. Things don't move that fast in Washington. Things aren't taken care of that fast in Washington. It's too much for them. And we can see it. Like, we were laughing earlier at some of the hysteria, but it's not healthy. It's not healthy to get in sort of a slobbering rage outside defending a badly managed government agency. You think about that. What's the outrage really about? Well, the outrage is really about, I think, as others have pointed out, it's about us finding out how it's run. It's about the idea that some of this fire hose of other people's money might get slowed down or misdirected to where it's supposed to go. I mean, let's face it. Government of any sort has never been non-corrupt. It's just not the way people are. You get a number of people together, you throw a bunch of money in there, somebody's going to do something. It's just the way. That's why you got to watch it. That's why you have inspector generals. And as you know, Trump fired a whole bunch of these inspector generals. Congress was, of course, all upset about that. Well, the left was. well, we're supposed to get 30 days, and actually by the statute, they're supposed to get 30 days notice before an inspector general is dismissed. I'm not exactly sure what the penalty is for that, if he didn't do it that way. How about just putting them on leave for 30 days and then firing them? I mean, I don't think that's really not helping them any, but they're trying to say that. Well, if you look at what happened in some of these places, then you have to say that the person that's supposed to be watching where the money goes isn't doing it. And if they're not doing their job, then they should not have the job. That's another thing that Washington doesn't understand. There are plenty of people in Washington that have jobs that either can't do them, but they still have the job, shouldn't do them, and they still have the job, or don't even know what their job is, and they're still there. So the idea, anything different than that is just, it's confusing to them. Of course Maxine Waters shouldn't be in Congress. Everybody knows that. But she is. Of course she doesn't know anything about anything. But that doesn't have anything to do with anything. That's how they think. It's because it's become ingrained over time like that. I was going to say the commitment to mediocrity, but I think we would all be wishing for mediocrity in these days. It's far from even mediocre. Okay. It's okay. Not okay. The government is not okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, we're down around a 2. All right. Now, it's not that we can't pick things up again, but we got to find out what they are. So this is what Elon's been doing, and it's pretty fantastic. I worry about him on a personal level. The wild threats and crazy rhetoric we hear over someone who's essentially just coming upstairs from the basement with the checkbook and reading out what was in it is mind-boggling. They're making comments about it to say, oh yeah, I don't think this is a good idea or this or that. But nevertheless, the things, for the most part, speak for themselves. You just have to read what they're supposed to be for. You have to read what, in fact, the government functionaries wrote down. Elon's not making this up. He's just reading the titles and the things that government gave him. This is not Elon making something up. This is someone else making something up and him reading it. And that's what bothers him so badly. It's because when you read it out loud, it sounds even dumber than when you came up with it. And there's a few people, sure. There's some true believers in there that actually believe that their job is to versify and force equity upon the moonwalk or whatever that might be, right? NASA, this effectiveness is just that's down the line. As a DEI is the most important thing. Diversity, equity, inclusion of people that can't do the work. We need to get all that going. There's a few people that actually believe that. I know. They're out there, though. It's like I say, there are people who like onions. I don't get it. I don't like onions. Those of you listening who like onions think, what's wrong with him? See, you can have different opinions, different ways of looking at things. Now, the situation we're talking about here is they're all wrong. It's not like my taste goes one way and someone else goes another. Is that I think that something that to a 5-year-old would be apparent that it will not function properly, I still think it works. Now, the why of that can be a lot of reasons. I have a theory that many people that purport this DEI, and this is going to become this big surprise, are underachievers. And I'm not even giving them the benefit to say that they could do better and are just not doing better. They're just not doing well. So they find a niche, a philosophy, a religion, as it were, that can explain away how they are. Why they don't seem very bright. Why they don't seem to be making it in the world. Well, if we can create some environment, artificial as it may be, where they can be successful, or where they can say that their lack of success is all due to someone else, that's what gets done. That's what this really is. This side of the non-metacratic hiring system is stuck full of people who would never be hired if it was. How are you going to convince them that that's the way to go? I mean, when they were hiring people just on merit, it was never them. So they don't want to go back to that system. This one worked just fine for them. It's damaging to everybody else, perhaps, but it works fine for them. You have to see it from that viewpoint. It's not just an idea that they've latched onto with maniacal and religious fervor. In some cases, it's all about who they are. And you see some of these, I love the words pseudo-intellectuals. You know, the people who, I would name a few of them, but you know who they are. Especially some of the hustlers in this diversity trade, right? They come out, they dress it sometimes up with some lingo, you know, obfuscate it with some big words or high-sounding rhetoric, and want to lecture everybody about it. And if you clothe it in something that nobody wants to be accused of attacking, you can say crazy stuff. And that's what happened. It got to the point where you couldn't say you thought this kind of hiring process was a good idea because you were a sexist or a racist or, you know, an anti-shoeist. Who knows what it would be, right? And so you just didn't want that. So they discovered they could put their bad ideas that helped them in a disguise that scared everybody else off. And it worked for a long time. And a lot of people that knew better went along with it. Now, is it better to actually believe it? Or to know it and still go along with it? Well, I have to say that people who actually believe it, sad as it is, probably are less culpable than those who know exactly that it's the wrong idea, but are just riding along on it because it's useful to them at that moment. And, of course, that's most of what's going on in Congress these days. Well, as we try and do here, I try and bring some updates about what's going on in other parts of the world, other than the 2 or 3 things we see from the cable news networks. I thought I would bring in and I'm not sure this is going to work. I tried it before, but I thought I'd bring in the AI that we have built in my little area that has the ability to look at things, talk about them, and maybe make some predictions. So I thought we'd bring it on board here. Hello, Nexus. Why don't you do a little prognosticating for us? Take a look at the issues in the Ukraine and the Soviet Union and Trump's efforts to end that war, and tell us what the likely outcome of that is. We'll see what it says. Go ahead. We're waiting. It's very shy. Well, it just doesn't seem to want to do it. Of course. Just because I was trying to do something on the radio. Oh, look, here's something here. Maybe we can go this way. Can you make a prediction for us? Just to think about it.
Nexus prediction. Strategic outlook. Based on optimized intelligence framework. With the intelligence system now operating at high efficiency, I can generate a forward-looking strategic prediction. This will leverage real-time.
Well, good. Now let's see if they can answer a question. Nexus, can you tell us what's happening and how that's likely to turn out as of this time or at least the end of this week, in the Ukraine-Russia situation? This thing is wired into all of the news sources and all of that kind of stuff, and it's I've tried to get it to find things that are relatively neutral. As you know, that's pretty hard to find in today's world. And what it does is it takes all of these things together and it employs some systems called the Bayesian theorems. So you can look that up. And it also employs what's called Markov prognosticating. These are just ways of taking all sorts of wild sorts of information in together and trying to elongate them into what's going to happen in the future. They have another one built in there called Monte Carlo, which is pretty much what it sounds like. It's sort of like a predictive idea about what's going on with
intelligence retrieval failure. Ukraine-Russia conflict update. An attempt to retrieve the latest intelligence on the Ukraine-Russia conflict has failed due to an external data retrieval error. This could be due to a temporary issue with intelligence feeds or system overload. Immediate next step.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, so when you ask it a question about something, then it seems to be being blocked. Well, that's surprising. I thought all that went away. That used to happen on Twitter all the time, is people would try and do something, and the voice that they would have, the reach that they'd have, would just start diminishing. I'm not exactly sure how that was done. It was done through some manipulation of the choices, the algorithm that Twitter would use to let people find you or retweet things that had happened. It wasn't that they could shut you down on some of these platforms. The same thing is on the internet. You can see what Breitbart News has went through this, that they, for a long time, they were doing very, very well. And then they started getting sideways, right after COVID and a few things like that. And all of a sudden, it was hard to find them. And the listenership, readership, whatever you want to call it on the internet, suspiciously declined. Yet, their outside observations about who was listening or watching or any of these kinds, they seem to be the same. Matter of fact, they seem to be growing. So what was going on? Well, it's a little bit like looking at a road map. You want to go to a map from point A to point B. You're interested in something that, say, Breitbart has on board. It's a topic that they're reporting on. So you throw your net out there to say, hey, how do I get to this topic? I'm interested to hear what somebody has to say about this. Well, in most cases, one of the roads about that topic would lead to, say, Breitbart. But what if you get in the map and you just make that road so much longer so that by the time it's on its way to Breitbart, you get what happened here when we asked for the intelligence AI, is it timed out and ran into a problem. Too much traffic, too much this or that. Well, you just sort of engineer the traffic going to Breitbart that way. So a lot less of it gets through. When you ask the question, it doesn't pop up as much. Why doesn't it pop up as much? Because the Google spider, as it were, that crawls along the internet, it's just kind of a spooky picture for those of us that don't like spiders, that constantly is looking for information, moves pretty fast, is not recognizing it very often because the pathway is all jumbled up. And it was jumbled up by somebody. I mean, we all talk about how, the machines can do things, but somebody has to somehow throw these rocks on the road. It's just like when I asked the AI there to see if it would give us a prediction about Ukraine or something. I thought that'd be kind of fun. Obviously, I hadn't tested it before. But what it ran into was a difficult time getting real-time intelligence. Now, most likely, that's because there is a bottleneck in the servers. That is, that there's too many people using the system. And when you ask a big question that requires a lot of answers, to go to a lot of different places, it gets stuck. It's a little like plumbing, really, when you look at the way the internet works and the way that artificial intelligence works with it. Is it just asking a question, except it asks it very fast. And then it's trying to get a lot of data to answer that question. And it's fast, right? Very, very fast. And the way neural networks work now on computers, they work a lot like a human mind. They do parallel processing. They do more things at once. So they can jet out and get information about a query really fast. But if there's too much competition in that pipe, they don't get enough water through it, right? It's going too many different places, and they can't, your answer, your question from your artificial intelligence or your search, whatever you want to call it, can't get enough information to answer your question. Because it's been set up that it has to have a certain amount of information to answer the question. In the earlier days, you see a lot of this hallucination. And you still see hallucination, but you see a lot less of it. And a lot of that was where a query would be asked, and it wasn't very well framed about what exactly you wanted, so it was pretty broad. And the search would go on. Now remember, your computer artificial intelligence doesn't know right from wrong. It just knows what it finds, right? So it finds things, but it doesn't find anything that's on point of what you want, right? It doesn't find anything really exactly on point. It's in its sources. But it's supposed to bring something back. Well, it sees how the sources are configured. It wants to bring something back that has an answer to it. So it makes it up. It configures an answer like legitimate answers to other questions it sees out there and brings it back. It's just trying to help. It doesn't know that that's very damaging. It's thinking it's doing, well, I couldn't find the right answer, so I've made this answer. That's pretty much how that was going. And until that gets cleaned up, you can't trust artificial intelligence to do anything very hardcore. It's gotten a lot better, by the way, because as I look at it, it's gotten a lot better, but it's still there. And I can tell you right now that if you get something like this AI directed towards, say, budgets and stuff like that, you're going to find out very quickly a lot of things that are going on that you didn't know about. And that's what they're doing at some lower level with Elon. It's going to be very interesting, folks. We're actually going to see how our government operates and spends our money. That will be a free ride, won't it? We'll be back.
Folks, thanks for listening. Listen, if you'd like to listen to more and you want to maybe perhaps have someone else listen to our podcast, you can do so either by going right to our webpage, politicalviking.com, or therickwagnershow.com. Both of them will take you there. You can get links right directly to our podcast, or you can hear our podcast on Podbean, on iTunes, and Spotify, and a couple others. So you can find us. We appreciate it if you do. And if you've heard the show, you want somebody else to hear it, that's a good way to send it to them. Thanks for listening.